Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are breaking down the Monday, November 20th slates, plural, of college basketball. We're going to talk about the early slate and the late slate here on November 20th, aka the kickoff of Feast Week, which ESPN has kind of named this Thanksgiving week when it comes to college basketball. This is going to be a jam-packed episode because we've got a lot of holiday tournaments going on. So these holiday tournaments are going to be going on for the next 2 or 3 days. So what I would recommend doing is either taking notes or coming back and listening to this tomorrow because we're going to have a lot of the same teams in action on the slates tomorrow, just with different opponents. So I'm going to try to make a little bit more generalized thoughts and statements about each team. So that way, all this information can be taken and used again tomorrow as we continue on with Feast Week. And I'm probably going to come back on and do another college basketball podcast on Tuesday or Wednesday that's going to talk about the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday Feast Week tournaments, like the Battle for Atlantis and tournaments like that. So it's a big week of college basketball. It is a big week of content here on Mike's Money Picks. It is Feast Week. So we are going to have college basketball content today. We're going to have college football and NFL content coming your way this week as well, because NFL has got a big time DFS slate on Thursday. College football has got a slate on Friday and a slate on Saturday. So it is a big time week here on Mike's Money Picks. So make sure you hit the like button to the video, help everybody get noticed, help the videos get found, rate and review the podcast you're listening on audio, and then hit that subscribe button. That way you can be notified when new episodes drop, like all of our NFL, college football, and college basketball content that is going to be coming your way here this week and in the next few weeks as these sports continue to happen together. All right, so enough with the introduction. Let's go ahead and start things off with the early slate for Monday, November 20th. All right, so a few things to keep in mind as we play this week, because most of the games that are going to be on the slates today and through the rest of the week are going to be taking place as a part of holiday tournaments like the Maui Invitational, like the Battle for Atlantis, like the Fort Myers Tip-Off. So what you're going to see with these holiday tournaments is there's a little bit of different strategy that goes with building lineups for it, because it's going to greatly reduce the ability to late swap, because DraftKings and FanDuel both very conservatively put the start times for these games on these slates. So that way, pretty much, you're not going to be able to swap a guy who's already in play. So there's not going to be a lot of opportunities for late swap. And in fact, if a game runs late, you're often looking at a game, that's supposed to start on DraftKings and FanDuel, and the first game isn't even done yet. In this tournament. So that's one thing to keep in mind when it comes to building your roster, is the opportunities for late swap are going to be much less, which I think helps the casual player, because I think late swap is really a tool that, especially in sports like college basketball and college football, really help, the sharks out there. Now, another thing to remember with these holiday tournaments is teams tend to play a deeper bench because they've got 3 games in 3 days and they want to save fresh legs. And also teams are going to let me rephrase. DraftKings and FanDuel are usually late to adjust prices in holiday tournaments. So a guy that has a big day often isn't going to get priced up the very next day, because it's a very quick turnaround for DraftKings and FanDuel to set their salaries for the next day. So just a few things to keep in mind as you build your lineups this week. So let's go ahead and start with the first game, which is going to be Tennessee and Syracuse, which is part of the Maui Invitational. I'm going to make sure to specify what holiday tournament all these games are a part of, so that way when it comes to building lineups for the next day, you kind of know what teams are going to be playing each other, as well as kind of how that tournament's going and where they're at in the bracket after day one. So Tennessee and Syracuse are playing today. It is projected to be Tennessee 80-66, which is quite a high total for Tennessee, because they're ranked 305th in tempo and 5th in defensive efficiency per KenPom. Now, that is like a recipe for I don't want to target players against Tennessee. They play at a slow tempo. They're a very good defense. Not going to go out of my way to find players to play against them. Now, they also play a very deep rotation so far this year, so it's also kind of difficult to target players for Tennessee as well. Santiago Vescovi and Josiah Jordan-James were probably their 2 best offensive players last year, and they really just haven't gotten going all that much this year. The situation that they're in, where Tennessee plays a deep bench and the usage is pretty spread out, it's very difficult for those 2 guys to hit value. The guy that I would probably target is Dalton Connect. He leads the starters in usage rate, but he really doesn't do a whole lot else outside of scoring. which is not what we want in DFS. However, it kind of does beg the argument if he does have a big non-scoring game, then he could end up with a really big fantasy total. But $7,200, not the worst price tag in the world, but not a guy I'm lining up to play. Now, for their bigs, I think Jonas Adu is a pretty solid play for Tennessee. I was only looking at guards there. Jonas Adu is a pretty solid play. He's been between 23 and 27 fantasy points each game. Syracuse, over the years of playing that 2-3 zone, they have been very susceptible to bigs historically. We'll see if that continues this year, even though they don't have Jim Boeheim. I still think they're running a little bit of that 2-3 zone. But it's not going to be, able to eat up the 2-3 zone on the offensive boards all the time without Jim Boeheim there. So next up for the bigs also, I like Toby Awaka. He's only $3,500. He's been a really good per minute player this year, averaging about 12 minutes a game and averaging about 13.8 fantasy points per game. The problem is that you don't really know how many minutes he's going to play. The good news is when he's out there, he has a 27% usage rate, and he's hit 4 times value in 2 out of 3 games. In fact, he's almost hit 5 times value in 2 out of 3 games. So he's a guy that if he just happens to get a lot of run, it would be a really good day for him. But you just don't really know how much run he's going to end up getting. Syracuse is currently ranked 41st in tempo per KenPom, which is pretty solid for them, especially considering what they've been historically. And they have allowed 70 points in all 3 of their games. So the teams have been able to score against this Syracuse team. Judah Mintz is the guy that is pretty much leading the slate in salary at the guard position. And he has been a pretty productive player so far this year. He's had a 32% usage rate so far. But it's hard to be this productive against Tennessee. He's got a long way to go to hit value against a very slow, very defensive-minded team. So I'm probably out on Judah Mintz for today, but probably going to go back to him later on in the tournament. JJ Starling, in my opinion, is still underpriced. He's averaging almost 5 times for his salary. He plays almost the entire game. He's played at least 35 minutes in every game. He has a 21% usage rate. Just so much to like about JJ Starling, and the price tag is still low. He would probably be the only Syracuse guy that I would be willing to play today. As the tournament goes on, like I said, I think you can open it up with Judah Mintz, and I think you can open it up with the other guys. The problem is with all the other guys not named Starling and Mintz, though, is that their rotation has really been a mess. You never really know who's going to play big minutes or who's going to get big usage for this team. Benny Williams came back from a suspension last game, and it was told that he was going to play a lot, and he really didn't. So I don't really know what to make of the rest of this rotation. What I do know is that when they're out there, Chris Bell is the guy that is 3rd on the team in usage. He had a big 29 fantasy point performance against Colgate, 25 real points in that one. So he would probably be a guy that outside of Mintz and Starling, I would be willing to target. But the rest of that rotation is really a mess. I would kind of like to see more clarity on it before I go out of my way to target some of these Syracuse guys. Game 2 is going to be Indiana versus Louisville, which is the second game of the Satva Empire Classic. Kind of 4 teams that are playing in New York City this week in that one. And this is a really interesting matchup because it's projected to be Indiana 76-71 per KenPom. And both these teams got beat yesterday. So that's why they're in this game here today. Indiana got beat by UConn by 20 points, and it was not a good showing for them. Currently, where it stands, their starting point guard, Xavier Johnson, is banged up. He was questionable heading into the Sunday game. He ended up playing, and he did not look good. He only played 14 minutes. Mackenzie Mbako is their super talented freshman who is apparently in the Mike Woodson doghouse and doesn't play a whole lot of minutes. His production has been really up and down. I think he's got a lot of upside, so I think he's a solid GPP play just because of his pure talent and his price tag that he's at right now. But you don't really know what he's going to do. I don't think there's any kind of safety there by playing Mbako. So the 2 guys that have been the most consistent for this Indiana team so far this year have been Kel'el Ware and Malik Renew. And I think they're both really solid guys to target against Louisville. So with Renew, he leads the team in usage, and he's had at least 29 fantasy points in each of his last 3 games, which is a very solid level of production for a $7,000 price tag on DraftKings. Now, Kel'el Ware is a double-double machine, and he plays pretty big-time minutes for a big. He's played at least 31 minutes in every game. And he will get you some block shots as well. If he has a good day in terms of rebounding and blocks, he can get a a lot of fantasy points really quickly. And I really think these two guys are good targets against this Louisville team. If you watch the Louisville Texas game on Sunday, I did because I'm a Longhorns fan. If you watch that game, Louisville just got dogged on the inside by Texas with Caden Shedrick and Dylan Mitchell both having pretty solid performances. Brock Cunningham as well, playing the 3 and the 4, getting a lot of rebounds. So I think that this is a pretty solid opportunity to play Ware and Renew in this game. I really do. I think they're going to be probably two of my favorite non-Zach Edey pay-up options on this Monday slate. Now, Louisville is a team that's interesting. They've given up 80 points to every opponent they played except for Coppin State, and I'm pretty confident Indiana is better than Coppin State. So I would definitely expect them to give up a lot of points in this one. Watching the Texas game today, they run a lot of their offense through their two guards, Trey White and Sky Clark. Trey White is currently averaging well over 4 times his salary. I don't think he's a bad play at all. I think he's a really solid cash game play. And then you got Sky Clark, who's a little bit more of a wild card, kind of dating back to his time at Illinois. He's very enigmatic. You never really know what you're going to get, but they are the two team leaders in usage. Both of them are north of 23%, and their offense runs through these two guys. Now, Tyler Johnson. And I didn't just pronounce it that way because I was trying to sound like Dabo Swinney talking to Tyler from Spartanburg. But his name literally is spelled Tyler Johnson. So Tyler is their leader off the bench in terms of usage rate. And he has been pretty solid so far this season. The Texas game, he had his best performance of the year, but it was largely coming from the foul line. So I think if you were to pivot off of White and Clark, I think Johnson would be a guy that if one of those two guys were to get in foul trouble or if one of those two guys were to struggle, those would be the guys that we would go to. And I like to play the guards in this game for Louisville because Indiana just got tore up by Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer at the guard position for UConn. So I would hope that White, Clark, and Johnson can do the same. Louisville's primary big is Brandon Huntley Hatfield. He did not play poorly against Texas. He ended up fouling out, and he kind of did a solid job on the boards. Didn't really do anything else in terms of production outside of points and rebounds. But I think he's a solid option. He's going to be needed to play big minutes in this one, going up against Renew and Ware. Next up is going to be Purdue versus Gonzaga, and this is, in my opinion, the game of the day. Looking at these two teams, these are two teams that are probably going to make extended runs in the NCAA tournament. This game is a part of the Maui Invitational. KenPom has it Purdue 78-76. So this is the highest total on the early slate. In my opinion, this is the best game to stack on the early slate. For Purdue and really the entire slate, whenever he's on it, it boils down to what we do with Zach Edey, right? And right now he's sitting at $11,000 on DraftKings. So the question is he worth that price? Well, he's hit 4 times value in one game out of 3 so far this season. And it was the one game where Purdue was against pretty good competition in Xavier. Edey has a massive 32% usage rate, and he scores about a quarter of their points. So with Purdue projected to score 78 points by KenPom, that means he's probably going to get about 19-ish points. So you're going to need a double-double to get the 3-point bonus, and you're going to need some blocked shots if you want him to hit his value. But those are two things that he does pretty routinely. So I do not have a problem going with Zach Edey at all. Now, a large reason why they're ranked first in offensive efficiency on KenPom is because they have Zach Edey. But another reason is the fact that they assist on 72% of their made field goals. So Purdue is a team that, because they have such a high assist rate, which, by the way, if you thought that didn't sound like a lot, it's 4th in the country right now. So it is pretty dang good. So a large reason why I think Purdue is really stackable today is because they do have that such a high assist rate. It means that when they're getting the ball to Edey down low, it's usually him scoring off of an assist. And when he kicks it out, it's usually to immediately find a guy to get an assist. So the only 2 starters north of 20% in usage are Braden Smith and Lance Jones. I think they are both very stackable with Zach Edey. Braden Smith averages almost 5 times value for his salary. And he's been over 4 times his salary in all 3 games so far. I think he's a really solid play. And Lance Jones averages 9 shots a game, which is not bad. He will get you rebounds and assists as well. And he has 1 game of almost 30 fantasy points, which would be 5 times value. So if I'm playing Edey, I'm actually probably very likely to stack him up with Braden Smith, in my opinion, just because I think that when Edey is going to be playing well, it's going to lead to Smith playing well. And with them getting assists on such a high rate of their field goals, I think that plays into both of their hands if you play them together. Now, on the Gonzaga side of things, it's really hard to gather much information from either of their first 2 games. They've just been beaten the brakes off of the two teams they played so far. Graham Ike is a Wyoming transfer who has been great so far in very limited minutes, hasn't played more than 20 minutes in a game. But Edey is a super tough matchup that we don't necessarily want to target bigs against. So I'm probably going to be out on him. Anton Watson is a guy that plays the 4 for Purdue, was very productive last year with Drew Timme at the 5. Probably going to be out on him as well, just because I don't think that this is where you attack this Purdue team. Braden Huff is their backup center, who is a true 7-footer and pretty good in the low post. Was very effective in the first 2 games, but it begs the question, was that garbage time or was that actual sustainable production? I do not know, but if Ike and Watson were to get in foul trouble, you would see extended run for Braden Huff. Now, they pretty much only play 2 guards because they're really the only 2 they can rely on. They were supposed to get Steel Venters through the transfer portal and it just didn't work out. But Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman are the 2 guards that play all of the minutes for this team. Nembhard is a Creighton transfer who on DraftKings, we saw at a much higher price last year when he was a part of Creighton. And he played all 40 minutes against Yale. So he's going to be out there on the floor a lot. If Purdue is scoring 76 points and they're not, or I'm sorry, Gonzaga is scoring 76 points and they're not scoring it on the inside, it's going to be probably because Nembhard has a pretty good game. I think Hickman is very much in play as well. He's kind of stepping into a new role this season. He was largely a backup last year, or even when he did start, he was not a big part of the rotation or of the usage. So I think those 2 guards are probably how I'm going to attack this Gonzaga team here on this slate. Now, the last game is FSU taking on UNLV as a part of the Sunshine Slam, a neutral site game in the state of Florida. And you've got FSU projected to win this one 76-75. FSU is ranked 24th in tempo, so they're a good team to target guys against. However, they're a nightmare to play guys for in DFS because they play a big rotation. They play a deep bench. Leonard Hamilton tries out all kinds of different lineups and all kinds of different guys, and you never really know what to expect. In terms of usage, their usage leader is Cameron Fletcher at 4,800. Now, he was a glaring misprice at only 3,000 on Friday's slate when they took on Florida, and he came through with 18 fantasy points. And so I am totally willing to go back to him at only $4,800 with his incredibly high usage rate. I think he's going to end up, as the season keeps going, end up around $5,500 to $6,000 on DraftKings, which is where he's priced on FanDuel already the last time they were on the FanDuel slate. Now, Jameer Watkins, and Cameron Corrin are their 2 usage leaders in the front court. I really do like Watkins. He had kind of a dud game against Florida because that game got really out of hand early, and I don't think you saw as much minutes from the starters as you normally would. Cam Corrin was a big-time usage leader in that Florida game, 37 fantasy points, had a double-double. I definitely think he could come through with that again here against UNLV. Baba Miller was a super talented freshman last year, which means he's now a super talented sophomore. And he's kind of underachieved in his career so far. I really do think the talent is there. The big game potential is there. He just has to put it all together and kind of stay out of his own way. At only $4,800, I think he's a solid GPP play here on this slate. I'm probably not playing anybody outside of Fletcher, Watkins, Corrin, or Miller unless anybody else starts to show more consistency in the rotation and in the usage. UNLV is the last team of the early slate. They're ranked 335 in tempos. They're not exactly a great team to target guys against. Luis Rodriguez and Dedan Thomas are the 2 guys that lead them in usage. So those would be 2 guys that you could definitely go to here in this one if you're looking to game stack it up. I think they're very reasonably priced. I don't think they're underpriced or overpriced for what they've been doing so far this season. Caleb Boone is intriguing. He's an Oklahoma State transfer who was suspended to start the season, and he is a big-time shot blocker. If he plays a lot of minutes in this game, he's going to end up being a very solid value at only $6,400 because he can get you a lot of fantasy points in terms of points, rebounds, and blocks very quickly. But the question is how much he's going to play. Is he still in the coach's doghouse? I don't know, but he's a very, very intriguing high upside option. All right, that does it for the early slate for Monday. So let's go ahead and take a quick breather and then let's break down the late slate. All right, so before we get started with the late slate, I did want to mention there are some places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on X at Mike's Money Picks. I tweet out the DFS rundown for every college basketball slate, where I kind of go over some of my favorite categories for different types of plays. And then I also, if there's any injury news or anything like that to update people on, I generally get that out there if it kind of changes the opinions for what I say here on the podcast. Also, some of these episodes are going to be audio only, not always video only. So if you follow follow me on Twitter, or I guess X. That will give you kind of the most up-to-date info as to, where the episodes are, if they're audio, video, or both. Because I do always tweet out whenever there's a new episode dropping. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description. There is a lot of smart people in there who have done really well, and the college basketball channel in there is really popping right now. We've got a lot of smart people talking a lot of different plays, a lot of different information, and it's led to some productive days from a lot of people in there. And we don't just do fantasy college basketball. We do college football, NFL, and there's a lot of people in there who have helped me get better at NBA, which was not one of my best sports. So definitely join that if you want to bounce some ideas off people, talk DFS, talk plays. It's entirely free. A lot of good people in there and a lot of fun discussion. And then lastly, I do write a full article for every slate where I break down my core plays as well as my attack strategy for the slate. I do write those articles on Patreon, patreon.com/Mike'sMoneyPicks. I do not write for free. Somebody wise once told me that. So it is only $3 a month, very reasonable to get those articles and see the plays, see the strategy. I'm not going to promise that you're instantly going to read those and start winning GPPs, but I can promise that you're going to get some good information, some good strategy, and help get you better at DFS for college football and college basketball, which I write up every week. Now, the plays yesterday from the Patreon were actually looking really good. I had 240 points in my lineup until Jaden Ledee completely nuked the night slate. So, stuff like that happens. But, I tend to get pretty good strategy and good core plays up there into those Patreon articles. Now, also, we are partnered with Sign Up Expert. So you can go to signupexpert.com/Mike'sPicks, and you will get the best offers and promo codes for any DFS, player prop, or sportsbook site. So if you want to try something new, if you're a new user on any of those sites, try it out, signupexpert.com/Mike'sPicks. It'll also sync to your location, so it'll only show you what's available in your state or province, which is very helpful. I'm in North Carolina, so we're going to be getting sports betting on January 1st, so I know exactly where I'm going on January 1st to get all those offers and promo codes. Signupexpert.com/Mike'sPicks. All right, now let's go ahead and talk the night slate. So this is a very interesting night slate where you've got a lot of different styles of teams and a lot of different styles of games. So the first game on the slate is Wisconsin taking on Virginia, and that is the Fort Myers tip-off that this one is a part of. And this one is projected to be Virginia 68-65, according to KenPom. Like Tennessee earlier, Virginia is a nightmare to target teams against. They're ranked 362nd in tempo and 11th in defensive efficiency per KenPom. They've only allowed one opponent to top 52 points so far this season, and that was Florida, who scored 70. However, Virginia is actually a pretty easy team to target guys on because their offense is very concentrated. Reese Beekman is their team usage leader, and he's hit 4 times value in 3 out of 4 games. I see him as a supremely safe play, like great cash game option, a guy that's pretty much going to guarantee you at least 27, 28 fantasy points. Ryan Dunn is another guy that he doesn't boast a huge usage rate, but he gets so much peripheral stats that it really doesn't matter. He's been over 30 fantasy points in 3 out of 4 games, and he's at his best when a game will get up and down and get more possessions, because we've kind of talked about this in the past, but the more possessions that are produced, even if there's not as much scoring, the more peripheral stats are going to be produced with rebounds, blocks, steals, that stuff. So definitely would help him to have a game that is going more up and down than the pace that Virginia normally plays at. The other guy I'm interested in is Blake Buchanan for Virginia. He is very intriguing to me. He just got inserted into the starting lineup before the NC-A&T game, and he has been pretty good so far this season. He's a younger guy. He's averaging 21 fantasy points in the 3 games that he started. So I definitely think that there's a little bit of intrigue there. Wisconsin is not a great defensive team. Wisconsin has allowed 68 fantasy points in each of their 3 games so far. However, they're shockingly ranked 97th in tempo. When I normally think of Wisconsin basketball, I think of 50 to 48 games with a bunch of white guys shooting mid-range jump shots. And that's not been the case this year with Wisconsin. They've been getting up and down with that tempo rating in the top 100. And I think that this is probably one of the most difficult teams to play guys from, though. Just a super weird stat profile. So AJ Storr is a transfer from, I believe, Providence. And he significantly leads the team in usage. However, he does not do that much else outside of scoring. So it's just not a great fantasy player to target because he's not going to be accumulating points in a variety of ways. There are other pieces in their start lineup. Stephen Crowell, Tyler Wall, and Chucky Hepburn were all better fantasy options last year. They all seemed like they were better players last year. And so they're priced all in the 6K range because I think DraftKings knows that they were good last year and they're waiting on them to be good this year. But right now, I just don't have any kind of bearing to see that these guys are going to be any good this year. And Connor Essegian was probably their best shot creator last year, and he barely even plays now. His high in minutes on the season is 11, and I don't know what to make of this team, y'all. Like, I might just X them out entirely. I think that if there is one team on the slate to just X out entirely, it is them. Until we can see more peripheral stats out of Store or more production out of Crow, Wall, Hepburn, and Essegian, I'm probably just out on this entire Wisconsin Badgers team for the time being. UConn versus Texas should be one of the best games of the day. It's the second part of the Satba Empire Classic. Both these teams won yesterday, so they get the primetime game tonight. This one is projected to be UConn 75-68. UConn is yet to be tested in a game, though. Even the Indiana game that they played on Sunday was kind of a blowout. Now, what is interesting with UConn is that Stephon Castle, their freshman who is likely to be a lottery pick, is out for the foreseeable future. And so what that led to against Indiana, which you saw a lot heavier usage from the two guards, Cam Spencer and Tristan Newton, particularly Tristan Newton. Against Indiana, he absolutely filled up the stat sheet, 23, 11, and 6, 50 fantasy points. It's not entirely shocking to see from Newton. Last year, I believe he had a triple-double, and he can fill up the stat sheet in a variety of ways. He's still underpriced for the role that he's playing. I really like Tristan Newton, and I think Texas's defensive weakness may be with the guards. So I think that really kind of brings Newton into play. Cam Spencer at $7,800 is a little more expensive, but the same deal. His usage is going to be boosted with Stephon Castle out. And then Solomon Ball saw extended minutes in the Indiana game with Stephon Castle. Not a whole lot of usage, only 14%, but he was out there on the floor. Only $4,600, not a super expensive play. I would prefer to target this UConn team through the guards, Spencer and Newton, as opposed to the bigs, Klingon, Caravan, and Johnson. I just think that how you attack this Texas team is with the guards. So speaking of Texas, they've scored at least 80 points in every game so far. They had to hit a shot at the buzzer to do it against Louisville on Sunday. Max Asmus with a super clutch shot. That's why they brought him in, is to be a shot maker and shot creator at the the end of games. But I think you could also say that their offense is due for a little regression in terms of scoring and fantasy production because they have scored 80 in every game. They're not projected to score 80 in this one. So I definitely think that those fantasy point totals, you can kind of expect to regress just a little bit for that reason. Caden Shedrick was largely their best player against Louisville, and he was a supreme play in DFS. Only 4K on Sunday and 44.75 fantasy points. Had 27.7 boards on a 37 or 36% usage rate. That's just absolutely elite. I still think he's underpriced. UConn is obviously a tough matchup, but I definitely think that this is a great play to play Caden Shedrick at $5,300. Max Asmus still led the team in shots yesterday at 19. Wasn't super efficient. This guy could really fill it up at Oral Roberts, y'all. And he's finally getting priced down to a point where I think we can play him again on DraftKings. And I would rather be early to Max Asmus than late to Max Asmus because when he gets hot and when he gets going, he's really going to fill up a stat sheet. Now, I do think that Texas is a team that, when looking at them, they're all very reasonably priced at or above where they should be. So I don't think there's any supreme values on this Texas team. Dylan Mitchell is no longer like a supreme value. I think he's still in play at $6,800, but I don't think he's the supreme value that he was at the start of the season on the earlier slates. Next up is going to be St. Joe's taking on Kentucky. This is called the Wildcat Classic, but it feels just like a way for Kentucky to get an extra home game. So this is projected to be Kentucky 82-66. St. Joe's ranks 122nd in tempo. So this game could really get up and down. Kentucky has the highest projected individual score on the slate. So Kentucky's definitely a guy we want to get some pieces from. And Kentucky is a team that all their guys were priced up after the Kansas game. Dillingham and Shepard were like supreme values in the Kansas game. And they have been really good since then. And so they've really gotten priced up. Dillingham with a 39.5 fantasy point performance against Stonehill. And then you had Reed Shepard with a 52.25 fantasy performance against Stonehill. So these two guys have been the best players for Kentucky largely in this early part of the season. And it seems like they get extra minutes in blowouts. So if this game does get a little bit out of hand, Dillingham and Shepard will probably be the guys that you're going to want in your lineups. Trey Mitchell is really Kentucky's only big right now, and he's hit 4 times value in every game so far this season. I think just because of how many minutes he's going to have to play, he's probably going to be a pretty solid play as well. And St. Joe's is not exactly a bad matchup for big men either. So this St. Joe's team, Rasheer Fleming is their big man. He's only $5,200. He's been a very good per minute player, but he does not play that many minutes, and he just kind of, I think his ceiling is limited for that reason. So if maybe does he get extended run and try to go in there and compete with Trey Mitchell? Maybe, I don't know. But if he does, then that would be a pretty affordable value play at only $5,200. Eric Reynolds is their second in usage guy. Rasheer Fleming is actually first. Eric Reynolds is second in usage. I think he's a decent play at his price tag. I would prefer him to be a little bit cheaper, but you are getting a guy who is going to have a high usage rate. The guy I want on this team, though, is Lynn Greer III. LG3 is what I'm going to call him. And he's their team's point guard, and he dishes out a lot of assists. And so if they do get going, if this offense is able to get going and keep this game close, it's probably going to be Lynn Greer racking up points, rebounds, and assists for you. So I definitely think that he's a very high upside play at only $5,400. Now, next up on the docket is going to be Colorado taking on Richmond, and this is a part of the Sunshine Slam. This one is projected to be Colorado 79-69. I thought that was a little bit high of a spread. I thought Richmond actually represented themselves pretty well so far earlier in the season. Colorado has not been tested yet, so we don't really know how good this team's going to be or how this kind of their rotation and their usage is going to look like in a close game. But KJ Simpson has been their guy so far. He's averaging well over 4 times value for his salary. He is leading the team in usage. He's been incredibly efficient, over a fantasy point per minute so far. So he's a guy I definitely think that is a very solid pay-up option that might go underlooked just because of people not really having seen this Colorado team yet. Javon Hadley is another guy that I would target. He's not a supremely high usage player, but he plays a lot of minutes and he puts up fantasy points in a lot of different ways. So you're kind of getting a lot of pathways to success for him with only, $4,200 for the salary. I think that's a very solid price tag for him. And I think he's a great secondary piece if you're looking to kind of stack up this game and play like a Simpson Hadley or someone else on Richmond and Hadley. I think that's definitely an option. Eddie Lampkin Jr. is a guy that I think might have the most upside on this Colorado team. He's a transfer from TCU. He is a big fella, and so he doesn't play a whole lot of minutes, but he's very efficient when he's out there. And Richmond just gave up a pretty big game, 17, 10, and 5 to Boston College's Quentin Post. So I think this Richmond team can be had on the inside, which was only going to mean good news for Eddie Lampkin. And if he does see extended run, he's going to be able to put up fancy points very, very quickly. Now, on the Richmond side of things, Neil Quinn had a huge game against Boston College, and DraftKings priced him up accordingly. It is my belief that while he was outstanding in that game, it was largely because of Boston College being super weak in terms of defending the interior. So I'm kind of not really looking to chase that performance right now. I'm going to let the price tag settle on Neil Quinn, or let me see if he can do it again before I go back to him at that high of a price tag. He is now barely the team leader in usage. He took that honor from Jordan King, who is now second in that category. I think Jordan King's a pretty solid play as well. He's going to play a ton of minutes. He just wasn't super duper efficient against Boston College, which is why he didn't have a big game. But you're going to get a guy in him that's going to have a pretty big time usage rate, and I'm willing to go to him for that reason. Outside of those two, Delani Hunt plays a ton of minutes and only $5,500. And then DJ Bailey at only $3,900. I think he is a misprice. He plays a little over half the minutes, but he's only $3,900, and he doesn't really have to do a whole lot to hit value, and I think he absolutely has the ability to do that. Next up is going to be West Virginia taking on SMU. This is a part of the Fort Myers tip-off, and this one is projected to be West Virginia 71-70, according to KenPom. At West Virginia, they're kind of dominated by Jesse Edwards. He's kind of the same guy he was at Syracuse. He's going to get you a lot of rebounds. He's going to get you some blocked shots. And when he does have a big-time scoring game is when he is going to have immense upside and potential to break the slate, because he is an outstanding rebounder. He is an outstanding shot blocker. He doesn't always score a whole lot of points. So I think he's an intriguing play, even at $9,000 on DraftKings, simply because if he does have a big-time scoring night, he does have the ability to break the slate and be the guy who leads the entire slate in scoring. Now, after him, the two more kind of intriguing guys to play more consistently, in my opinion, are Quinn Slazinski and Kobe Johnson. So, Kirk Risa, who was supposed to be West Virginia's starting point guard this year, is out right now. And so that has kind of opened up a little bit more of an on ball usage role for Slazinski. He's operated a little bit more as a primary ball handler and as a point forward. And so you've seen some decent assist totals for him just because the offense is running through him. And he has been pretty solid so far to start the season. He's had 4 times value in 2 or 3 games. I definitely think he is going to be a guy that is going to get heavy usage. And if this game does get up and down, he's going to put up stats in a variety of ways. Kobe Johnson is the guy who has been operating as the point guard. 36 fantasy points last time out against Jacksonville State. I think he's starting to kind of fill into this role. And I think he's a very solid play at only $6,500 because SMU does like to get up and down. They have a pretty high tempo rating, and they have a guard, Zurich Phelps, who had one of the highest usage rates in all of college basketball last year. Now, there have been some shenanigans with Phelps so far, though. He had 2 major down games where he didn't play a whole lot of minutes, didn't do a whole lot, and it was kind of classified as like a coach's decision to have him come off the bench and have him not play that much. I'm guessing that he broke some kind of team rule, pissed the coach off somehow. I don't know, but those 2 games are kind of outliers. And FanDuel has got him super duper cheap right now because of those 2 games. Even on DraftKings, $8,100 is not a bad price tag to play for this guy because last year he had one of the highest usage rates in all of college basketball. And if you think he's going to regress back to that now that he's out of the doghouse, then I think he can definitely come in with a big time performance. Now, Tyreek Smith and Keon Ambrose Hilton are both very solid per minute players, but I see them struggling in this matchup against Jesse Edwards. I don't think it is a great matchup for either of them, even though, on paper they look like decent value plays. Chuck Harris has hit 4 times value in 3 of 4 games. He's a Butler transfer that I think is going to become one of their better players. He was a big time beneficiary of the Zurich Phelps shenanigans against Lamar. And the other beneficiary when Phelps was benched was BJ Edwards. Had 2 huge games when Phelps was coming off the bench. So if you do think that, if you think you're going to fade Zurich Phelps, then I definitely think that Harris and Edwards would be guys that would be beneficiaries of Phelps either getting benched or not having a good game. Now, the last game of the night is one of the best ones. It is Marquette taking on UCLA. It is projected to be Marquette 71-66. This is the last game as a part of the Maui Invitational, which is weird because normally they reserve the last game for the Chaminade game, which in round 1 is going to be Kansas taking on Chaminade. So I thought it was kind of weird that this game was the 11-15 game. But anyway, Marquette is projected to win this one by 5. Tyler Kolek is their point guard. He's one of the best point guards in the nation. And he left the Rider game early with an ankle injury. It did not miss a game. Came back for the Illinois game, played 37 minutes, and put up 40 fantasy points. So I think he is full go. Very solid play at $8,500. I'm not concerned about the ankle because of how many minutes he played against Illinois. Now, both the guards, Tyler Kolek and Cam Jones, sport a 25% usage rate, so I see them both as solid plays. Marquette's primary big is Oso Ighodaro. He's their starting center, and he's been over 29 fantasy points in all 3 games. They don't really have a whole lot else as a big man option other than Ighodaro, so he's going to have to play big-time minutes, and he's going to have to play well against this UCLA front court. And no one else on this team really intrigues me just because Marquette's usage is so lumped through those 3 guys, and those 3 guys play such heavy minutes as well that I think really the only reason to play any of the other guys is if you're just strategically fading Kolek, Jones, or Ighodaro. But I don't see a need to do that because I think if this game is a good game, I think those 3 guys are going to be the ones that are producing. Now, on the UCLA side of things, you've got a very interesting scenario where Marquette is historically, in the last 2 seasons, been a poor rebounding team. We've seen bigs go off against them. And the reason why is because Oso Ighodaro is so important to this team that he knows he cannot get in foul trouble. And so there are times where instead of putting himself in situations where he can foul, he kind of plays a little passively. And so you kind of see him, avoid fouling, and he can kind of get out physical because of it. And it kind of makes sense because, like, if he were to get in foul trouble, they would be screwed. So I definitely think this is a really solid matchup to target Adem Bona because he is going to be playing the 5 and he's going to have a chance to go up against Ighodaro and get those increased points and rebounds with Ighodaro playing a little more conservatively. And Bona already has a 28% usage rate on the season, 12.7% offensive rebounding rate. Both those numbers rate out very well. So $8,800 for him. Very, very playable guy in this first game to me. Now, Lazar Stefanovic and Sebastian Mack are the two guys that are kind of their off-ball guards that have decently high usage rates. Their fantasy point production kind of mirrors their salary. I'm not super intrigued by them, but if this game does get going up and down, they could be served very well because they're going to be guys that are taking a lot of shots. Now, Dylan Andrews was held out of UCLA's last game, and that was classified as a coach's decision. And that really frustrated a lot of people because it wasn't announced before tip off yet. It would have been real nice to know, Mick, that that was the decision you made. Actually, I probably shouldn't talk to Mick Cronin, but like that, Mick Cronin is a coach that will fight you. Maybe not me specifically because I'm not in Maui, but Mick Cronin wants all of the smoke. So anyway, it would have been nice to know that before tip-off, but either way, I expect him to be back in the lineup tonight. All indications are that he is back in the lineup tonight. He is this team's starting point guard. He is the guy that's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. And if this game gets going up and down, he's going to have a big-time performance. Now, another guy that is intriguing is I cannot remember how to pronounce his first name, but Bayutensil for UCLA. Bayutensil. Close enough. Bayutensil is a guy who is a freshman. He's a forward. He's super talented. He's from Turkey, and he's gotten his waiver cleared by the NCAA, and he's going to be able to play in this game. He's only $4,000. I don't know what his role is going to look like, but at only $4,000, you don't really need to pay a whole lot to find out. So Bayutensil is a guy that I would be interested in. And then Jan Vide is a guy that was the beneficiary of the Dylan Andrews shenanigans. So if Dylan Andrews does end up getting suspended again, Jan Vide would be a guy to play, only $3,600. Now, one other team I do need to talk about, trying to mention the whole Maui Invitational on here. I mentioned that Kansas plays Chaminade in game one, so they are not on the early or on either slate for today, just because DraftKings has something against Chaminade. But anyway, Kansas, when they're on the slate Tuesday and Wednesday, I don't know what their prices are going to look like, but the two guys I'm always interested in are Hunter Dickinson whenever he's going up against a team that is undersized, just because he uses his size very well, dominates the glass, is going to play a lot of minutes. That's not a concern with him. If you're going up against a team that's undersized, Hunter Dickinson's a smash play. And then also Kevin McCullough is a guy that last year put up a lot of peripheral stats, and this year is now scoring more as well. So Dickinson and McCullough are the two guys from Kansas that when they're back on the slate, those are going to be the guys I am most interested in. All right, so that does it for the night slate. That does it for the Monday, November 20th slate of College Basketball DFS early and night edition here on this episode. And like I said, we try to get all these holiday tournaments covered so that way Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, these teams are back in action. You have enough of a profile of these teams that you know which guys you want to target. You know how to target specific defenses, how to target specific teams as well, which teams are going to be playing fast tempo, which teams are going to be playing slow tempo, all that stuff. Hopefully you guys have that covered for the next few days. Remember, if you want more from me, follow me on X at Mike's Money Picks. Discussion in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description. And full slate attack breakdown articles are on the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. All right, that does it for this episode, y'all. It is a big week for us with Thanksgiving week. We're going to be back later in the week to talk more college basketball, college football, and NFL. Gonna have a lot of fun. So make sure you subscribe, get those notifications when those episodes drop. And if you like what you saw in this video, hit that like button. Helps the videos get noticed, helps grow the community, and I really do appreciate it. All right, that does it, y'all. Best of luck to everybody on all their DFS endeavors. I will see you back later this week to talk more college basketball, college football, and NFL. Thank you guys for watching and listening, and I will see you next time.